Hello, the internet. My name's Lara, and I am the author of The Law of the Prince Charming. That novel has been updating regularly on Wattpad for 4 months now, and I have hit what I consider to be the halfway point of the book. I don't actually know whether there's the same amount of words in the front half as the second half, but it's basically the point at which I consider to be the halfway point. If you have not yet read that novel, there's going to be spoilers in this video, so I don't know, proceed with caution. Go read the book and come back, or go read the novel on Wattpad and come back. There's a link. I know, right? But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit today about the characters, the three main characters of the three characters that I consider to be the main characters of The Law of the Prince Charming. At this point, you've been reading them for half of a book. You've probably gotten to know them a little bit. You might be curious to know a little bit more about them, and so I'm just going to kind of talk about how I came up with them, how they developed as characters. I am a discovery writer, which means I didn't really know, I didn't have anything planned, basically. I had the general ideas of each of these characters, and then I just started writing, and what came out is what came out. So that is what I'm going to be talking about today. Like I said, there's going to be spoilers for the first half of the book. I'm going to do my best to not spoil the second half of the book. Editing Laura might have to make sure that I do not spoil anything in the second half of the book. And starting again on this coming Monday, the update schedule is going to continue as normal. I just wanted to kind of, I don't know, let that cliffhanger kind of simmer for a minute. And since it ended on a Wednesday, I was like, I don't want to start the second half of the book on a Friday and then have you wait the weekend and then Monday again. So I decided that I was going to do this video instead. I'm sorry if you were really hoping for an update of the story, but that will be coming on Monday. And today you get to listen to me talk about characters. So Wild Rose is actually the first character that I came up with for this novel. If you watched my previous video, you'll know that already. If you didn't watch that previous video, I'm going to go ahead and go over it again now because, I'm talking about characters, and this is how he came about. I had an idea for this story for a while. It was kind of on the back burner until I read a particular fairy tale called The Little Wild Rose, and that was basically what jump-started this novel. And I knew that even though in the Little Wild Rose tale, the Wild Rose was a girl, that I wanted the Wild Rose to be a boy. And very intentionally an effeminate boy. And somewhat intentionally and not entirely intentionally, somewhat based on my husband. He knows that I kind of based Wild Rose off of him a little bit, and I always say that Wild Rose is far more smug than he is, and there's just definitely some bits of my husband in Wild Rose, and I don't know, it just kind of ended up being the way that it happened. But Wild Rose started out as a traveling storyteller, only I didn't call them storytellers back then. I hadn't even gotten that far, discovery writers. Yeah. I was actually at the time playing around with calling them tailors, like T-A-L-E-R-S. I didn't even know how I was actually going to spell it, but I was playing around with that. That obviously did not stick. But anyway, he was wandering around and dealing with fairy tales at the time, and his first mission was, well, the first mission on camera was going to be a female Bluebeard, and I just kept running into an issue where I kept trying to add a second character because he needed somebody to talk to. Otherwise, there was no way to know what he was thinking because there was no one to talk to. And so I kept trying, and none of the characters that I came up with for him to play against were working. And so at some point, I don't even know at what point it really was, I started over. I didn't wipe everything. I put all the stuff that I had into a folder, and I started the story completely again, and that was when Tabitha popped out. I probably did it intentionally with having it be a female Prince Charming, but I actually don't remember. I don't remember the thought process that had me specifically choose her. I just know that I started writing, and what you read in the first chapter is basically how I created the character. I mean, it's been cleaned up, it's been edited, there's been some foreshadowing added and all that kind of good stuff, but for the most part, I created Tabitha by writing that first chapter. And so once I had my female character to play, my masculine female character to play off of my feminine male character, the story really kind of started taking off from there. And my characters just kind of developed naturally like that. Wild Rose was, of course, the know-it-all because I needed somebody to explain everything. And he was the perfect, he was the perfect character to do that. And Tabitha was the one who didn't really know what was going on and was is the reader avatar, so that, the reader can kind of figure out what's going on in this world because it needs a little bit of explaining. For the most part, everything that I created with these characters came along as I wrote. Wild Rose's smugness, his somewhat effeminate nature, his lack of care so much about his effeminate nature. I know that in some cases, there was a time when, with Wild Rose, I thought that he might have sort of a chip on his shoulder about being very effeminate and very beautiful, and possibly people not taking him very seriously. And that just ended up not being a thing. Like, the character as I developed him was perfectly fine needing to dress up like a lady and play the role of a lady and play the role of a man, or whatever. He just kind of doesn't care. He definitely identifies male, but has no problem playing the role of a female if he needs to. That really was not a super intentional choice. It was just kind of how the character came out. Tabitha was a little bit different because Tabitha has some aspects of me in her. I've said before that, like, Tabitha was based on me and Wild Rose was based on my husband, but for the most part, they are their own characters so much that unless you really know me or my husband, you're probably not going to see a lot of it. They are their own characters now. But one of the things that I did very, very intentionally with Tabitha was that she is a Prince Charming. She's playing the role of a man, and this is where the real spoilers start coming in. So, like, if you're still watching this and you haven't read the story, I'm starting to spoil things now. During the Bluebeard tale, Tabitha has to dress as a lady and go into that tale, and she's never done that before, and she's really uncomfortable in that space. And this was a situation that I went through in my own life where I grew up as a tomboy, and then at a certain point, a lot of girls grow up as tomboys, right? And at a certain point, they discover makeup and they discover dresses and all this kind of stuff, and they kind of get into being more feminine, and that, or at least that's what it felt like to me, and that is not something that ever happened to me. At least not to the level that most of them did. Most of the people that I am familiar with did. I've never really been into a lot of things that are traditionally female, and so I wanted very specifically to take Tabitha and explore that a little bit. And when she has to dress as a female, that was very similar to my own experience of the first time that I ever like really got professionally done makeup done, and I did not look like myself anymore. And it's not that I didn't like how it looked, but it didn't feel like me anymore. And so I got to a point where I decided that I just didn't need makeup in order to, I don't know. I don't want to say I didn't need makeup in order to feel like myself, but I mean, I got to a point where I just decided that makeup was not going to be a thing that I did. I will do it for special occasions, obviously, and if I ever get on, like, the TV, if I ever get popular enough to be on actually the TV, obviously, there's times and situations for it, but for the most part, I do not feel the need to do it. And I wanted Tabitha to also be in a place where she knows that she is female, but she doesn't feel the need to, she doesn't need to look like a female in order to be female, right? So there was a lot of playing around with that in the Bluebeard, because the first tale in the Cinderella, that was really just, here's the most basic tale. Cinderella, pretty much everybody knows. And I wanted the focus on that to be learning about the tales themselves, so that the reader knows what's going on as much as possible. And so Tabitha is just playing her role, and, we go forward. Bluebeard was where I wanted to shake it up, because that's still kind of a known tale, but less known. And I wanted to play around with her being female, but then realizing that she's comfortable in the Prince Charming type role. And so when she has to face the Firebird and do all that stuff to save everybody, and then she actually switches roles during this tale and becomes, one of the people who helps out the Bluebeard's wife. I guess in the tale it's just the Bluebeard's wife. I think she actually had a name in the original tale. Well, either way, when she became that, she was filling that role, and she was comfortable in that role. And obviously, as the story continues, we saw her getting more comfortable with the idea of being female, and now that she was rejected by Wild Rose. See, I told you, spoilers. Now that she was rejected by Wild Rose, she is in this space where she thinks that everything that she was discovering about being a woman is just not a great thing. She is just unhappy with it in general. And so that's the story is going to go. And I did, at the beginning of this video, say that I have the three main characters. So Tabitha and Wild Rose's stories really intertwined, because they've got the romance budding, they've got, that going up towards the climax where suddenly doesn't work, obviously. And Guebeer is just kind of, Guebeer, oh, he was kind of rough. Wild Rose and Tabitha, I wrote them, they came out, they were characters, they've had tweaks, obviously. I've discovered more about them. Guebeer has had major changes and rewrites to his character at least 3 times. At least 3 times since I started this novel. He started off, he's also had name changes at least 3 times in this novel. I'm not even sure I remember what his original names were, but he started out as more of a pretty boy, because I like my pretty boys. And I wrote like that for a while, and I could not nail down his personality. I would write him, and it would just come out all wrong. And it's been so long now, I don't even necessarily remember what the problem was. I just remember that no matter what I wrote, he didn't feel right. He didn't feel solid. He didn't feel consistent. Like, a lot of the ways you do write characters when you're discovery writing is you kind of latch onto the character, and it's almost like they already exist, or like you're discovering them, discovery writing, you're discovering them as you're writing, and they're responding to what's happening in the story in at least somewhat predictable ways. And with Gabir, I felt like as I was writing him, I was having to force him into a lot of situations because I didn't know how he would actually respond to things. And so eventually, and the odd thing was is that I knew exactly what I needed to do with him. I knew, you guys don't know what his tale is yet, at this point yet in the story, but I always knew what his tale was. Ever since his inception, I knew what all three of their tales were. And, I mean, I don't think it's really a spoiler that he has a tale. It's kind of like the theme. Anyway, but I always knew what his tale was, and I guess was having trouble putting a character into that tale. And so he was too soft at first, and then he was entirely too angry. And I always had him being overly polite to women, but even that in itself somehow was inconsistent. And so I'm pretty sure I finished the book the first time and I still didn't have him nailed down. It wasn't until the second real thorough draft that I finally actually started hammering him in, and a lot of that might end up being spoilers. I was gonna say, what can I say without it being a spoiler? He ended up being a lot more depressed than I thought he was. And when I realized that, I think is when I finally started understanding the character a little bit better, because there was anger and there was frustration and there was motive behind his actions and his words. And I just, until that point, didn't know what they were. And then once I figured out that a lot of it was driven by depression and guilt, that really, his character came together. And truthfully, I think I've had more of my beta readers and people who have read this connect with Gabir than they have with Tabitha or Wild Rose. I've had more people tell me that Gabir is their favorite character, and I'm fine with that. I love him. And, I'm happy that he developed into a character, because he definitely felt like an afterthought. It's like Tabitha and Wild Rose are the main characters, and then Gabir is also there. And, while I always had a plan for him, like I said, I knew what his tale was, I was worried for a long time that he would just feel like he was shoved in there to fulfill that tale that I needed to have happen. And the fact that he turned into a real character really, really made me happy. And the relationship between the three of them ended up being a lot more important to the story than I thought it was going to be. Though I really should have known better, because I tend to when I write stories, have my characters be fairly close. Whether or not they're actually friends in what they would say, I just tend to have my care. I like loyalty, I like trust, I like all that kind of thing, and so my books tend to have that, and so it shouldn't have been a surprise that that ended up being a theme throughout this book. So that is a little bit of an overview of the three main characters in The Law of the Prince Charming. Wild Rose, Tabitha, and Guebir. They were all Discovery written. Guebir gave me more trouble than the others. That wasn't even his name at the beginning. Wild Rose and Tabitha have always been named those names. In a book where names are so important, it just seems like it was appropriate that it took me that long to find his name, because I really needed to find him and that name. So if you've stuck with them for the first half of the book, I hope that you will, stick with them, find out what they're going to go through in the second half of the book. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I'm the author, so I can decree that, because I've already written it and I really, really like it. If you've gotten this far in the video without having actually read the book, what you waiting for? Go read the book. I mean, it's there, it's free, I will read it to you. I have videos of myself reading it so that you don't have to do it yourself if you don't want to. And on Monday, I'm going to start posting the second half of the book, and I mean, it's a good time. I'm really excited about getting this book out there and seeing what people think that are not my friends, because my friends, of course, are going to be as supportive as possible. They know me on a personal level, so I'm sure they get things like bits of me in the book that possibly other people won't. And it just really would be interesting to see people that I've never met who like my book, like my characters as much as the people who know me. And so that is going to be this video. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Wild Rose, Tabitha, and Guebir and how I kind of came up with them. If you've got any specific questions, you can go ahead and comment on this video, or comment in the Wattpad, at the bottom of the Wattpad page that this is posted in, assuming that it doesn't have any major spoilers, or if it doesn't require a major spoiler in order to answer it. I'm happy to answer anything that you're curious about. And I hope that you look forward to the chapters going back up again starting on Monday. And I hope you enjoy reading the rest of my novel. Alright, I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.